live here. My kids are upstairs.
Hands behind your back. You're under arrest for distribution.
I'm a federal agent. DEA.
My credentials are...
Sure you are. Cuff him!
You're making a career-ending mistake right now.
What you're about to witness is the moment a routine drug raid turned into a department-destroying catastrophe. May 17th, 2024. Ridgewood, New Jersey. A quiet suburban neighborhood. A SWAT team surrounds a family home at dawn. They have a warrant. They have tactical gear. They have absolute confidence they're about to take down a major drug operation. But they don't have the right house. And they definitely don't know who lives inside. Because the man they're about to handcuff in front of his terrified children isn't a drug dealer. He's a 15-year veteran of the Drug Enforcement Administration. A special agent who's put away some of the most dangerous cartel leaders in North America. In the next 26 minutes, you're going to see how one catastrophic mistake destroyed careers, cost taxpayers millions, and exposed the ugly truth about racial profiling in American law enforcement. This is the story of the DEA agent who was raided by the very system he spent his life serving. Before we continue, I want to know, where are you watching this from? Drop your country or city in the comments right now. Are you from the USA, UK, Canada, or somewhere else? Let me know in the comment. And if you think accountability matters, hit that like button. Meet Marcus Anthony Williams. 43 years old. A decorated special agent with the Drug Enforcement Administration based out of the Newark Field Division. Marcus didn't just wear a badge, he earned it the hard way. Born and raised in Philadelphia, Marcus grew up watching his neighborhood get torn apart by the crack epidemic of the 90s. While other kids were playing basketball, Marcus was watching friends lose parents to addiction and brothers disappear into the prison system. He made a decision at 16 years old he was going to be part of the solution. He joined the Marines right out of high school. Served 2 tours overseas. When he came home, he enrolled in John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York City, graduated with honors, applied to the DEA, and spent the next 15 years becoming one of their most effective agents. His record was impeccable. Marcus had been instrumental in dismantling 3 major drug trafficking organizations. He'd testified in federal court over 40 times. He'd received commendations from the Attorney General's office. He'd trained local police departments on proper raid procedures and civil rights compliance. He was married to Dr. Amara Williams, a pediatric surgeon. Together, they had 3 children, 14-year-old Jasmine, 11-year-old Marcus Jr., and 8-year-old Isaiah. They lived in a beautiful 4-bedroom home in Ridgewood, New Jersey, an affluent suburb about 20 miles from Manhattan. Marcus coached his son's youth football team. He volunteered as a mentor for at-risk teens. He was the guy neighbors called when they needed help. He was living the American dream. On the morning of May 17, 2024, Marcus had the day off. He was planning to take his youngest son to a baseball game that afternoon. His wife was already at the hospital for an early surgery. His daughter was getting ready for school. It was supposed to be a normal Friday. Now let's talk about Sergeant Kyle Brooks, 37 years old, 12 years with the Ridgewood Police Department, 5 years leading their tactical response unit. Brooks was known among his colleagues as aggressive, the kind of cop who saw every situation as a potential threat. The kind of leader who believed overwhelming force was always the answer. His personnel file told a story. 4 citizen complaints in 3 years. 2 for excessive force. 1 for unlawful detention. 1 for racial profiling. All of them were investigated internally. All of them were dismissed. His fellow officers had mixed feelings about him. Some admired his take-no-prisoners approach. Others quietly worried that his tactics would eventually blow up in the department's face. Brooks had a particular obsession with drug enforcement. He'd made it his personal mission to clean up what he called suspicious activity in Ridgewood's nicer neighborhoods. He believed that drug dealers were infiltrating suburban communities, hiding in plain sight. He'd been pushing the department for months to be more proactive, more aggressive, to stop waiting for crimes to happen and start preventing them. On May 16, 2024, the day before our story takes place, Brooks received what he described as an anonymous tip about a residence on Maple Ridge Drive. The tip claimed that the home was being used as a distribution hub for cocaine and fentanyl, that luxury vehicles were coming and going at odd hours, that the occupants didn't fit the neighborhood. Brooks didn't do a thorough background check on the property. He didn't surveil the location for more than a few hours. He didn't verify the tip with federal databases. He just got a warrant, assembled his team, and planned a dawn raid. What Brooks didn't know was that the luxury vehicles he'd observed were Marcus's personal car and his colleagues from the DEA who occasionally stopped by. The odd hours were federal agents working irregular schedules. And the family that didn't fit the neighborhood? They were black, in a predominantly white suburb. That was enough for Brooks to assume they were criminals. I have a question for you. Do you think officers should face consequences for illegal stops? Or should they get away with it? Comment below with your thoughts. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button because we bring you real stories of justice and accountability every single week. May 17, 2024, 6:47 a.m. The Williams family home was quiet. Marcus was in the kitchen making coffee. His daughter Jasmine was upstairs in her room, scrolling through her phone before school. His two sons were still asleep. Then the front door exploded. Not knocked, not announced clearly. Exploded. A battering ram shattered the reinforced doorframe. 8 officers in full tactical gear flooded into the house, screaming commands that overlapped into incomprehensible noise. Police! Search warrant! Get on the ground! Show me your hands! Marcus's training kicked in immediately. He knew exactly what was happening because he'd done it hundreds of times himself. But this time, he was on the wrong end of it. He dropped to his knees, hands raised. "I'm not armed," he shouted. "There are children in this house." Sergeant Brooks was the third officer through the door. He saw a black man in athletic wear and immediately assumed he was the target. "Are you Marcus Williams?" he demanded. "Yes, but you need to listen. You're under arrest for possession with intent to distribute." "I'm a federal agent," Marcus shouted. "DEA. My credentials are in my wallet." Brooks didn't hear him. Or didn't care. Everyone says that. "Turn around." 2 officers forced Marcus face down onto his kitchen floor, the same floor where he'd made breakfast for his kids 1,000 times. They yanked his arms behind his back. Zip ties cut into his wrists. Upstairs, Jasmine heard the commotion. She ran to the hallway and froze. Armed men were storming through her home. "Dad!" she screamed. "Stay in your room!" Marcus yelled back. "Lock the door! Don't come out!" But it was too late. An officer was already climbing the stairs. He reached Jasmine, who was crying and shaking, and ordered her to show her hands. She was 14 years old, in her pajamas, terrified. "Please," she sobbed. "We didn't do anything wrong." At 6:51 a.m., 4 minutes into the raid, Marcus's 2 sons emerged from their bedroom, confused and frightened. They saw their father on the floor, surrounded by men with guns. "Daddy?" Marcus Jr. whispered. That's when Marcus Williams, a man who'd stared down cartel enforcers without flinching, felt something break inside him. His children were watching him being treated like a criminal in his own home. "Listen to me," Marcus said, his voice controlled but desperate. "My badge and credentials are in my wallet. Right pocket. Check it right now." Brooks finally nodded to one of his officers. The officer reached into Marcus's pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. Inside was a gold D badge, a federal identification card, and credentials that identified Marcus Williams as a GS-13 Special Agent with the Drug Enforcement Administration, assigned to the Newark Field Division with top-secret security clearance. The officer's face went pale. "Sarge, you need to see this." Brooks took the credentials, For a moment, the entire house went silent except for the sound of Jasmine crying upstairs. Brooks looked at the badge, then at Marcus, then back at the badge. "This doesn't mean anything," Brooks said, his voice uncertain now. "We got a credible tip about this address." Marcus, still face down on his own kitchen floor, spoke with the measured tone of someone who'd just realized they had all the leverage. "Sergeant, you have 30 seconds to get me off this floor and call your captain. Because in about 5 minutes, my office is going to realize I'm not answering my phone. And when they send someone to check on me, you're going to have federal agents pulling up to a scene where you've got one of their own in zip ties." Brooks hesitated. He'd made busts where suspects claimed to be cops before, but the credentials looked real. And something about the way this man spoke, calm, authoritative, absolutely certain, made his stomach drop. "Cut him loose," Brooks finally ordered. As the zip ties were removed, Marcus stood slowly. He looked at Brooks with an expression that wasn't anger. It was worse. It was disappointment. "What's your name and badge number?" Marcus asked. "Sergeant Kyle Brooks. Badge 2847. "And who authorized this raid?" "I did, based on an anonymous tip." "An anonymous tip." Marcus let that hang in the air. "Did you run this address through any federal databases?" Brooks didn't answer. "Did you coordinate with any federal agencies to make sure you weren't about to raid a federal agent's home?" Still no answer. "Did you do anything beyond get a warrant based on an uncorroborated tip?" By now, other officers in the house were starting to realize what was happening. They were looking at each other, looking at Brooks, starting to understand that this wasn't just a mistake. This was a career-ending disaster. At 7:02 a.m., Marcus's cell phone rang. It was his supervisor at the DEA Special Agent in charge, Thomas Ramirez. Marcus answered, his eyes never leaving Brooks. "Yeah, Tom, I'm fine. But you're going to want to send someone over to my house. Ridgewood PD just raided my home. They've got my kids terrified, my front door destroyed, and about 45 seconds before this becomes a federal incident." He hung up. Brooks knew it was over. You could see it in his face. The realization that he had just committed the worst mistake of his law enforcement career. We received information that, save it, Marcus interrupted. "You're going to need it for your deposition." Within 15 minutes, 3 DEA vehicles and 2 FBI units arrived at the scene. Within 30 minutes, the Ridgewood police chief was on location, looking like he wanted to disappear into the ground. The body camera footage captured everything, every command, every moment of Marcus on the ground, every second of his children's terror. And the timestamp showed something damning. After Brooks saw Marcus's credentials at 6:53 a.m., he kept him in zip ties for another 9 minutes. 9 minutes of humiliation. 9 minutes of a federal agent being treated like a suspect in front of his kids. That wasn't a mistake. That was retaliation. Pause for a second. If you believe body cameras save lives and expose the truth, smash that like button right now. Also, comment justice if you think this officer got what he deserved. I read every single comment, and I want to hear your opinion. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. 12th down, 15 to 17,000. Revelation and power shift. The moment Special Agent in charge Thomas Ramirez arrived on scene, the power dynamic shifted completely. Ramirez was Marcus's boss, a 23-year DEA veteran, former Marine, not the kind of man who raised his voice often. But when he walked into that house and saw Marcus standing there with red marks on his wrists, with his traumatized children clinging to him, with his front door hanging off its hinges, the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Which one of you is in charge?" Ramirez asked quietly. Brooks stepped forward. "I am. Sergeant Kyle Brooks, Ridgewood PD." Ramirez looked at him for a long moment. "Sergeant Brooks, I'm going to ask you one time. Did you run this address through INSIC before you executed this warrant?" INSIC, the National Crime Information Center. The database that would have immediately flagged this address as belonging to a federal law enforcement officer. Brooks's silence was the answer. Did you coordinate with any federal agencies? Silence. Did you do any surveillance beyond a few hours yesterday afternoon? Silence. Ramirez turned to Marcus. Are you okay? Are your kids okay? Physically, yes, Marcus said. His voice was steady, but there was something underneath it, something dangerous. Psychologically? My 8-year-old son just watched armed men put his father on the ground like an animal, so you tell me. By now, the Ridgewood police chief, Thomas Hendricks, had arrived. Chief Hendricks was a 30-year veteran who prided himself on running a professional department. He took one look at the scene, at the destroyed door, at the DEA agent standing in the house, at Marcus's children huddled together, and knew his department was about to be destroyed. Agent Williams, Hendricks began, his voice shaking slightly. On behalf of the Ridgewood Police Department, I want to apologize. Chief Hendricks, Marcus interrupted, with all due respect, I don't want your apology right now. What I want is every piece of documentation related to this raid. I want the warrant application. I want the alleged tip you received. I want the personnel files of every officer who entered my home, and I want them by end of business today. Agent Williams, I understand you're upset, but upset? Marcus's voice rose for the first time. Chief, I've conducted over 200 raids in my career. I know the protocol, I know the procedure, and I know what a legitimate operation looks like. This wasn't it. This was lazy police work at best and racial profiling at worst. The words hung in the air, racial profiling. Every officer in the room stiffened. Now wait a minute. Brooks interjected. This had nothing to do with race. We got a tip about drug activity at my address? Marcus turned to face him fully. What was the tip? Specifically? Brooks hesitated. That luxury vehicles were coming and going at unusual hours. That the occupants appeared to be conducting business. Luxury vehicles. Like the government-issued SUV I drive? Like the personal vehicles of my colleagues who stopped by? We didn't know they were federal agents. Because you didn't check. And the occupants who appeared to be conducting business? That was my family. Living in our home. In a nice neighborhood. While black. Brooks's face reddened. That's not. We would have raided this house regardless of, would you? Marcus's voice was ice cold now. Because I've lived in this neighborhood for 7 years. My white neighbors have luxury cars. They have people coming and going. They work unusual hours. How many of their doors have you kicked in? No answer. FBI Special Agent Jennifer Cortez, who'd arrived with Ramirez, was documenting everything. She was the Bureau's liaison to civil rights investigations. And she'd seen enough. Chief Hendricks, she said, the FBI will be opening an investigation into this incident under Title 18, United States Code Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. We'll also be looking into potential violations of Title 42, Section 1983. The Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division will be notified by this afternoon. Hendricks looked like he might be sick. Agent Cortez, I'm sure we can resolve this. This isn't a departmental matter anymore. Ramirez cut in. This is a federal civil rights investigation. And I can promise you, it's going to be thorough. Brooks tried one last desperate move. The warrant was signed by a judge. We followed proper procedure. You got a warrant based on false information, Marcus said. And even if the warrant was technically valid, the execution was reckless. You terrorized my children. You destroyed my property. And you kept me restrained for 9 minutes after you knew I was a federal agent. That's not procedure. That's ego. At 7:34 a.m., Marcus's wife, Dr. Amara Williams, arrived home from the hospital. She'd received a frantic call from Jasmine. When she pulled into the driveway and saw police vehicles, DEA units, and FBI cars surrounding her home, she ran inside in her scrubs. What she saw would haunt her, her husband, usually so strong and composed, holding their 3 children who were still shaking. Her front door destroyed. Strangers in tactical gear standing in her living room. "What happened?" she demanded. "Marcus, what happened?" Marcus met his wife's eyes. "They raided our home. Thought I was a drug dealer." Amara looked at Chief Hendricks, then at Brooks. Her expression went from confusion to fury in seconds. "You did what?" Her voice was dangerously quiet. "You raided our home? With our children inside?" "Ma'am, we received information," Brooks began. "I don't want to hear it," Amara snapped. She turned to Marcus. "Are the kids hurt?" "Not physically." "Not physically," Amara repeated. She looked at her daughter, who was still crying, at her sons, who looked shell-shocked. Then she looked back at Brooks. "I'm a doctor," she said. "I took an oath to do no harm, but I'm also a mother. And what you did to my family, terrorizing my children, humiliating my husband in his own home, I will make sure you answer for this. I don't care how long it takes." The room was silent. Chief Hendricks cleared his throat. "We're going to conduct a full internal investigation, no," Marcus said firmly. "You're going to cooperate with the federal investigation, and then you're going to pray that the Department of Justice shows you more mercy than you showed my family." By 8:15 a.m., the news had spread through law enforcement circles. A DEA Special Agent had been raided by local police. Within hours, it was on social media. By that afternoon, it was national news. The body camera footage, once it was released, went viral. Millions of people watched Marcus Williams, a decorated federal agent, being forced to the ground in his own kitchen. Watched his children crying. Watched Brooks keep him in zip ties even after seeing his credentials. The public reaction was immediate and explosive. Within 48 hours, 3 separate investigations were launched. FBI Special Agent Jennifer Cortez led a team that descended on the Ridgewood Police Department like a hurricane. They seized every document related to the raid. Every email, every text message, every communication between Brooks and anyone else involved in planning the operation. What they found was damning. The anonymous tip Brooks claimed to have received? There was no record of it. No logged phone call, no written report, no documentation whatsoever. Brooks had created the tip himself, or at the very least had acted on something so flimsy it shouldn't have even warranted a conversation, let alone a tactical raid. The surveillance Brooks claimed to have conducted? 2 hours. On a Thursday afternoon, he'd watched Marcus arrive home from work in his government vehicle and labeled it suspicious. The warrant application? Filled with vague language and exaggerations. Brooks had described confirmed drug activity when there was none. He'd claimed multiple sources when he had 0. Judge Patricia Reynolds, who'd signed the warrant, was mortified when she saw the actual facts. She stated on record that if she'd known the full context, that the address belonged to a federal agent with no criminal record or history of complaints, she never would have signed it. But there was more. The FBI discovered that Brooks had a history. In the past 2 years, he'd led raids on 4 other homes in affluent neighborhoods. 3 of those homes belonged to black families. All 3 raids came up empty. None resulted in arrests. This wasn't an isolated mistake. This was a pattern. The DEA launched its own investigation, not into Marcus, but into why their systems failed to prevent this. How was it possible that a local department could raid a federal agent's home without any coordination? They discovered gaps in interagency communication. They found that local departments didn't always run addresses through federal databases before executing warrants. They uncovered a broader problem. Federal agents, particularly agents of color, were vulnerable to exactly this kind of mistaken identity. The DEA issued new protocols requiring all federal law enforcement residences to be flagged in databases accessible to local police. They mandated that any warrant execution at such an address require federal notification. But the damage to Marcus's sense of security was already done. Chief Hendricks had no choice but to open an internal investigation. But unlike the previous complaints against Brooks that had been swept under the rug, this one had federal oversight. Internal Affairs interviewed every officer present at the raid. What emerged was a picture of a unit that operated with minimal supervision and maximum aggression. Several officers admitted they'd had concerns about Brooks's methods. One officer, speaking confidentially, said Brooks always assumed the worst about people, especially in situations where race was involved. We all saw it, but no one wanted to be the guy who called him out. The body camera footage was analyzed frame by frame. Experts noted multiple violations: excessive force used during the initial breach, failure to properly announce themselves, clearly continued restraint of Marcus after his identity was confirmed, traumatization of minors without attempting to separate them from the scene, Brooks's confrontational demeanor. Even after realizing the mistake, the report concluded that the raid violated department policy on multiple levels and represented a catastrophic failure of judgment and leadership. By June 2024, 1 month after the raid, the evidence was undeniable. No legitimate tip existed. No proper investigation was conducted. The warrant was obtained under false pretenses. The execution was reckless and traumatizing. Brooks had a history of similar incidents. Racial profiling was a contributing factor. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of New Jersey announced they would be filing federal civil rights charges. On June 28, 2024, 42 days after the raid, Sergeant Kyle Brooks was terminated from the Ridgewood Police Department. Not suspended, not placed on administrative leave, terminated. The termination letter, later made public, cited gross negligence, falsification of warrant applications, violation of civil rights, and conduct unbecoming an officer. Brooks lost his pension. 12 years of service wiped out. The police union initially fought for him, but once the full evidence became public, they quietly backed away. But the termination was just the beginning. On August 15, 2024, federal prosecutors charged Brooks with deprivation of rights under color of law, a felony carrying up to 10 years in prison. They also charged him with making false statements in a warrant application. Brooks attempted to fight the charges. His attorney argued that he'd made an honest mistake, that there was no racial animus, that he was just doing his job. The jury didn't buy it. In February 2025, after a 3-week trial, Kyle Brooks was convicted on both counts. The body camera footage played during the trial was devastating. Watching Marcus being zip-tied in his own kitchen while his credentials sat visible on the counter. Watching his children cry. On April 3, 2025, Brooks was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and 3 years of supervised release. The judge, in his sentencing remarks, said, "You violated the trust placed in you as a law enforcement officer. You terrorized an innocent family. And you did so with a recklessness that suggests you believed you were above accountability. You were wrong." Kyle Brooks is currently serving his sentence at FCI Fort Dix in New Jersey. He'll be eligible for release in 2028. His law enforcement career is over forever. Marcus Williams didn't just want criminal justice. He wanted systemic change and compensation for what his family endured. On July 10, 2024, Marcus and Amara Williams filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the Ridgewood Police Department, the Township of Ridgewood, and Kyle Brooks personally. The lawsuit sought damages for violation of Fourth Amendment rights, ill search and violation of 14th Amendment rights, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligent hiring, training, and supervision, destruction of property. The lawsuit included detailed accounts from all 3 children about the psychological trauma they'd suffered. Jasmine had developed anxiety and nightmares. Marcus Jr. had become withdrawn and fearful of police. Isaiah, the 8-year-old, refused to sleep alone for months. Dr. Amara Williams testified about finding her daughter having panic attacks at 3 a.m., about her sons asking if their father was going to be taken away. In December 2024, the Township of Ridgewood settled the lawsuit for $8.7 million. $4 million went to Marcus and Amara. $1.5 million was placed in trust for each of the 3 children. The settlement also required a public apology from the Ridgewood Police Department, mandatory bias training for all officers implementation of new protocols for warrant execution creation of a civilian oversight board annual civil rights audits for the next 5 years. On December 15, 2024, Chief Hendricks held a press conference. With Marcus standing beside him, Hendricks read a statement. On behalf of the Ridgewood Police Department, I offer our deepest and most sincere apology to Special Agent Marcus Williams and his family. What happened on May 17th should never have occurred. We failed in our duty to protect and serve. We violated the trust of our community. And we traumatized an innocent family. We are committed to ensuring this never happens again. Marcus spoke next. His words were measured but powerful. I spent 15 years of my life serving this country and protecting communities from drug violence. I never imagined I'd experience that violence myself at the hands of the very system I swore to uphold. What happened to my family was not just a mistake. It was a symptom of a larger disease in American policing, the assumption that black people, regardless of their profession or status, are criminals first and citizens second. Until we confront that truth, this will keep happening. I'm grateful for the accountability we've received, but real justice means making sure no other family endures what mine did. The video of that press conference has been viewed over 30 million times. The Williams case didn't just result in individual justice, it triggered broader reforms. In January 2025, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy signed the Marcus Williams Law, requiring all local law enforcement agencies to check federal databases before executing warrants on residential properties. The law also mandated coordination with federal agencies when raids were planned in areas with federal employee residents. The DEA implemented new protocols requiring all agents to register their home addresses in a protected database accessible to local law enforcement for deconfliction purposes. They also created a rapid response system for situations where agents or their families are detained by local police. Chief Hendricks retired in March 2025. The new chief, appointed from outside the department, brought in federal consultants to completely overhaul training and accountability systems. The tactical unit Brooks led was disbanded. A new unit was created with stricter oversight and mandatory de-escalation training. 4 other officers who'd served under Brooks were reassigned or retired early. The Williams case became a touchstone in debates about police reform, qualified immunity, and racial justice. It was cited in congressional hearings, featured in documentaries, used as a training case in police academies across the country. Because it wasn't just about one bad cop. It was about a system that allowed bad cops to operate unchecked for years. A system that valued aggression over investigation. A system where a decorated federal agent could be treated like a criminal in his own home simply because of the color of his skin. Marcus Williams became an advocate for police reform. He testified before Congress. He spoke at law enforcement conferences. He partnered with civil rights organizations. His message was always the same: I had a badge, credentials, and federal authority. And it still didn't protect me. Imagine what happens to people who don't have those things. If this story proves that accountability matters, do 3 things right now. Smash that like button, subscribe to this channel for more stories of justice, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and comment below. Do you think body cameras should be mandatory for all officers? Let's discuss. The story of Marcus Williams is one that should never have happened. A federal agent, a man who dedicated his life to fighting the very crimes he was accused of, should not have been terrorized in his own home. But this story matters because it exposes a truth that many people don't want to acknowledge. In America, a badge, a degree, or a distinguished career doesn't always protect you from being seen as a threat first and a human being second. If this could happen to a DEA Special Agent, it can happen to anyone. Body cameras saved this case. Without that footage, it would have been Marcus's word against an entire police department. The video evidence was undeniable. It showed the truth. It delivered justice. That's why transparency matters. That's why accountability matters. That's why reform matters. Marcus Williams and his family will carry the scars of May 17, 2024, for the rest of their lives. But their courage in demanding justice created change that will protect countless other families. Real accountability doesn't just mean punishing the guilty, it means fixing the broken systems that allowed the guilt to exist in the first place. This is your reminder to stay informed, stay aware, and always demand accountability. Because justice isn't just about what happens after something goes wrong. It's about preventing it from going wrong in the first place. Until next time, this is Channel Name, reminding you, everyone deserves dignity, respect, and the presumption of innocence, no matter what they look like, where they live, or who they are. Stay vigilant, stay vocal, and never stop demanding better from those who serve and protect.